I joined the bartending scene in the early 2000s just as this new golden age of the cocktail that we're currently in was kicking off and really gained momentum. I think there's a magic and an energy on those islands that is quite hard to pin down.
But the closest that I got to getting to Jura was the end of the pier at Paterson.
The Jura pub's probably one of the finest whisky bars in the world because it's the only whisky bar in the world where you can actually smell the fermenting wash from across the road. You can hear the hissing of the stills. First of all, Fettercairn. What a stunning distillery. It's a picture postcard. Well, Tamnavulin, this typically Speyside distillery, right in the heart of Speyside.
Copy of Whisky magazine, and guess who's on the cover?
I'll tell you a story about Richard. I watched a video of this comedian doing a tasting a few years ago and I thought it was hilarious. And he just goes, I just thought it was hilarious, so I started drinking scotch. And I said to him, he's not a comedian. I work with him. He's a whisky maker.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Discover series with the Whisky Advisor. I'm Uday Balaji. So today we're off to a fairly remote part of Scotland and we're going to be discovering all things Jura with global single malt whisky specialist at White & Mackay, Stephen Martin. Hey Steve, how are you doing? Welcome to the show.
Hello Uday, thank you for having us. Very excited to talk to you about some of these wonderful whiskies and I hope you're all well in India.
Doing very well here, thank you. Thank you so much for being on the show with us. But just before we get into the conversation, as always, I'd just like to request all of you to please like, subscribe and hit that little bell so that you'll get notified every time we have a new video in the series. So Steve, I know it's very early for you down there in Edinburgh, but what do you have in your glass?
I've got the Jura 10-year-old. It's a wonderful whiskey, a little bit of bourbon, a little bit of sherry in there. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the new Jura 10-year-old I've got. Yeah, you've got the orange in there. But lovely dram nonetheless. And it's 11:30 in the morning, so I'll probably hang on to this until lunchtime.
Well, it's never too late, right? Never too early, sorry. So guys, I hope you have a dram as well. This is going to be a fun conversation. So pour yourself a dram, sit back and enjoy. Slanja. So Steve, looking at your career, the 16-year career in the industry, it's been very exciting and quite distinctly split between two different spaces, so to speak. On one hand, you were a bartender making waves in the UK bartending scene. And then you moved to single malts and you worked with Diageo for a while. And now you handle all the single malts for the White & Mackay portfolio. So could you just tell us a little bit about your journey, please?
Yeah, that's right, Uday. It's been some journey, and I don't think that's particularly uncommon these days for whisky ambassadors and whisky advocates around the world. Like a lot of people, I joined the bartending scene in the early 2000s just as this new golden age of the cocktail that we're currently in was kicking off and really gained momentum. I was always quite fascinated by it, going into bars as a young kid, whether it be a pub or a restaurant or a cocktail bar. I always quite liked the high energy, the camaraderie, and I liked that aspect of hospitality. So yeah, I went into the bars as a young teenager to learn to make drinks. And I think hospitality gives you such a great grounding, and it's something I would recommend for anybody to do. And you learn some invaluable life lessons as well, whether you work in a hotel, bar, club, restaurant, whatever. So I really enjoyed it. So when I moved into working with alcohol brands, it was quite natural for me to go and work with brands that are kind of in the forefront of cocktail culture, like tequila, gin, vodkas. And I had a lot of fun with those brands over the years. But I think being from Scotland and living in Scotland, when you work in alcohol, you naturally gravitate towards whiskey because it's part of who we are. We grow up around these distilleries and we see our grandfathers and our fathers drinking whiskey, and it's something that we're very accustomed to. We're very familiar with it from a young. We're familiar with it from a young age, in the sense that we understand this is part of who we are. So No, it's great to move into whiskey, and I've never looked back since.
Wonderful. So every episode, what we do is we just do a quick rapid fire to get to know you a
Okay.
little better. So if you're ready, your first whiskey.
It was a Lafroig.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's quite a strong start into whiskey, huh? Your favorite bar.
Oh, my favourite bar, Aero Club in San Diego.
Okay. Your favorite food.
Mexican.
Your favorite sport or hobby.
Football or soccer.
Mhm. Cats or dogs.
Dogs.
Books or music.
Music.
Beaches or mountains.
Beaches.
Coffee or tea.
Ooh, tea.
Batman or Superman.
Batman.
So, what is your most favorite whiskey memory?
Oh, wow, that's a cracking question. Whiskey memory. I think there's so many. I probably have to. I probably have to go to the first time I went to the islands to drink whiskey. And I actually went to Isla and Jura, and it was an amazing trip. I think there's a magic and an energy on those islands that is quite hard to pin down. And I know you've been to Isla, and next time you're
Mhm.
over, of course, we'll take you to Jura, and you can see one of the best whiskey making locations in the world. But I think one of the finest whiskey moments for me would have to be the first time I went to the Jura pub, which would have been about 5, 6 years ago now. The Jura pub's probably one of the finest whiskey bars in the world because it's the only whiskey bar in the world where you can be sitting at the bar, enjoying a dram, have a half a lager in your hand, we call it a Hoff and Hoff.
Mhm.
And when the people from the local community, when they open the door and they walk in, you can actually smell the fermenting wash from across the road. You can hear the hissing of the stills while you enjoy a lovely dram of Jura. And that is a completely unique whiskey drinking experience that you can't really get anywhere in the world.
Mhm.
So no, I think that's probably the best for me. It was the first night in the Jura pub.
Wow, that is a whiskey memory. I must admit, so normally I ask a different question to finish rapid fire, but last night I was up quite late and I watched the end of your Instagram live session with Master of Malt, and you were so passionate about how important whiskey moments are, and I feel the same way. So I had to throw in that question. Uh, but like you said, yes, I've been to Isla. So I went there a few years ago, and I went to all the distilleries except for Ardnahoe now, which was a construction site back then. But from that construction site, the view of the Paps of Jura, just absolutely stunning. And but the closest that I got to getting to Jura was the end of the pier at Paterson, and I didn't have any time to go to Jura. So, Steve, if you could just take us on the 10-minute ferry ride across to the island and tell us about the island, its people, and of course, the distillery.
Yeah, of course, Uday. It's the amount of people that I speak to that go to Isla, they make that pilgrimage to Isla to visit these distilleries, but they don't go to Jura. And I must say, I was guilty of the same. It was probably my third or fourth visit to Isla before I went to Jura. And it's just an amazing place. You get the ferry from Port It's about 4 minutes 50, 5 minutes
Mhm.
over the Sound of Isla, and you jump on a small boat, in your car, and the Sound of Isla is a very fast-moving water. It goes right down Bunahaven and Kalila from Port and it's really fast-moving. So the boat, actually, the small ferry that you travel on, it has to go in a curve. If it goes straight, you'll end up away down the island, away down on the rocks. So it just takes you 5 minutes, and you arrive into the port on Jura, Fuelin, and there you drive around the island and you start to make your journey. And as you arrive, you see the Paps of Jura looking down on you. These three mountains, the really kind of iconic piece of inner Hebridean landscape.
Oh, yeah.
And they're looking down on you as you drive around the island. And when you get there, you realise that this is quite remote. You know, very small island population, one road. You know, it's one shop, one pub, but it's quite. You kind of feel like you've been watched when you're in Jura because there's 6,000 deer on the island, roughly about 6,000 deer. And if you look hard enough, you can spot them hiding in the hedgerows or ducked in the long grass. Sometimes they might even just walk right out in front of you. You've got to drive careful. These big, amazing stags, and Jura does translate as Deer Island in Old Norse. So you learn pretty quickly that the island belongs to the deer. When you come round the island and you go into Craighouse, which is the small, well, the biggest village, but a small village nonetheless, the first thing you see is a distillery on your left-hand side. There's a wonderful distillery that's been making whiskey, or making alcohol since 1810. Remarkable distillery. And you can shop, also the post office, where you can pop in there. And you'll also find the one pub, which is part of the Jura Hotel. The Jura Hotel is brilliant. You know, they do such a great job running the hotel, and the food's amazing. It has to be amazing. It's the only place to eat, really. So, you know, you get a great pint, you get amazing food. And when you're there, you have to kind of blend in with the local community and have a chat with them. Everybody's got a great story. And when you talk to some of the locals, you'll find that not all of them are from Jura. They say that they just kind of end up getting blown there. They've maybe gone to visit family or a friend, or maybe gone on holiday and just fallen in love with the place and never left. So everybody's got their own story. There really is an amazing community. And what you'll realise quite quickly is that distillery across the road from the pub is the focal point of that community. It's integral to that community. And the community is the heartbeat of that distillery. The distillery survives because of the community. And when the distillery closed in 1901, it shut for 62 years. And there's not many whiskey distilleries I can think of that were closed for such a long period of time that actually survived. But the distillery was redeveloped and reopened in 1963 to ensure that that island population and that island community prospered. And, you know, it's still there today. And I think it's probably one of the smallest distilling communities in the world, certainly at, you know, commercial scale. So it's a remarkable place, and I look forward to taking you there.
I look forward to going. I can't believe that I didn't go across. You know, it's a long way to go from India all the way to Isla, and just that 10-minute ferry ride is something that I didn't have time for. But next time, absolutely. But Steve, just to talk a minute about the flavor profile of Jura. Could you just tell us, you know, what is the quintessential Jura profile to you? And also, you've got so many bottles behind you. If you could just quickly tell us about the range. But before we get to that, guys, so I know this is the older bottle, but in India you have the Jura 10, and I have to mention that Jura and the Dalmore represented in India by this company VBev, which is very dynamic. And I'll put the link to their website in the description below. So make sure to check it out. So Steve, please, if you could tell us about the range and the profile.
Yeah, so the whiskies from Jura have gone through quite a transition over the last 200 years or so. They would have been very different back in 1810 to the whiskies we have today. The range was remodelled not so long ago, and we launched a new range of whiskies called the Signature Series, 5 incredible bottles from the Isle of Jura, beginning with Jura Journey. I've got a bottle there. Jura Journey, which is it's a great example of quality bourbon casks and the impact that they can have in the maturation of whiskey. I think we learned a number of years ago that Jura and ex-bourbon casks are a match made in heaven. And Jura Journey is a great example of this. We then have the Jura 10-year-old and 12-year-old, which are ex-bourbon casks, and then you've got a little bit of sherry influence as well. The casks are finished in butts that have previously held Oloroso sherries. You then have Jura 7-wood. Jura 7-wood, which is kind of, as it says on the tin, it's 7 different casks, 1 ex-bourbon casks and 6 casks from various different regions of France, all imparting different characteristics. Very complex whiskey, beautiful, sweet and luscious through the middle, top notes of peach and lovely sweet licorice coming through in the background. You then have the Jura 18-year-old, which is finished in cask of Cabernet Sauvignon wines from the south of France. So these big, rich, round and robust wines. So the whiskies, you get that dark fruit, that bitter chocolate, that sweet cinnamon coming through. A lovely whiskey to end the meal. We also do some great limited editions and vintages. We launched the Jura 212 not so long ago, which is a 13-year-old finished in chinkapin casks. And we launched a 21-year-old Time and Tide, one for travel retail, one for domestic. Both very unique in their own right, wonderful whiskies nonetheless. And recently we've also developed the red wine cask finish whiskey, which is just a great combination of ex-bourbon casks and wonderful red wine casks from France. So yeah, we've got a lot going on. The brand is busy. We've got more and more products coming out. So yeah, there's going to be plenty of Jura for people to enjoy all over the world.
I hope to see some of those in India soon. We just got one expression and that's definitely not enough. But talking about whiskies and again, the various brands that you handle, of course, the Jura is one, and the Dalmo is one that we're going to be covering later in the series. But there are two brands that I'm sure our Indian viewers are not very aware of and generally are not as popular as Jura and the Dalmo, which are Fettercairn and Tamnavulin. So, Steve, could you just tell us a little bit about these two brands, please?
Yeah, no, absolutely. First of all, Fettercairn. What a stunning distillery. It's a picture postcard. It's a wonderful site in the northeast of Scotland, Fettercairn, a distillery that opened in 1824, which, directly after the Excise Act of 1823, which made distilling whiskey profitable. So the distillery opened. And in the early 50s, they actually installed a cooling ring on the head of the spirit still. So when you visit the distillery, you turn up to this wonderful, beautiful white distillery, these beautiful white walls, and you're greeted by this incredible man called Stuart Walker, who's our distillery manager, who's been there for 30 years this year, actually. And he'll show you into the still house, to this cooling ring, which drenches the spirit still in cold water during the spirit cut of distillation. And what that does is it creates a very tropical and fruity characteristic that comes through in the new make and starts to develop as the whiskey matures in ex-bourbon casks. So it really is a hotbed of ingenuity and innovation in the Fettercairn distillery. We've got a lot of wonderful things going on. We've just released a 16-year-old, which is made using chocolate malt, so heavily kilned malt. So yeah, heavily kilned malt, you get a far lower yield. God, you get this deep, rich, nutty coffee, chocolate characteristic coming through in the whiskey. We've also got a 22-year-old that's coming out, and we've got more whiskies in the pipeline being released. But the range goes from strength to strength at Fettercairn. And I can honestly say, the Dunnage warehouses up there at the distillery contain some of the best whiskey I've ever tried in my life. So it's a wonderful place that hopefully you get to visit. And Tamnavulin. Well, Tamnavulin, this typically Speyside distillery, right in the heart of Speyside. And Tamnavulin was a purpose-built distillery that was a result of the boom of the 50s and 60s. At the end of the Second World War, Winston Churchill famously observed that, the British economy needed rejuvenating. So the British government started to develop export markets for whiskey. And as a result, in the 50s and 60s, many sites began to double their output. For example, Fettercairn and Dalmore did. Many sites began to expand their warehousing. But also there was a number of distilleries built in the 1960s. There was 11 distilleries built in the 60s, including Tamnavulin. So Tamnavulin was built in 1966. And it's not a small distillery. It is actually quite a big site, 4.4 million litres of pure alcohol a year. So our warehouses are bursting with this stuff. We've got plenty of Tamnavulin for you. And we launched the Tamnavulin double cask in 2016 on the 50th anniversary of the distillery. Now, historically, the distillery, which is built on the site of an old woolen mill on the banks of the River Liffey, you have to visit, it's wonderful. But the distillery would have been crucial in providing spirit for these big blended Scotch whisky brands. It still is today. But recently, 2016, we actually launched the double cask, which was the springboard for the Tamnavulin range to expand and develop. And what you'll find with Tamnavulins is the whiskies contain a lot of green fruit, kind of crushed Bramley apple, moves into that poached pear territory. So, you know, we've got the sherry cask edition, which explores in depth the synergy between Scotch and sherry. And we've just launched the red wine cask editions as well. So again, another whiskey brand from White Mackay that's super, super busy. And we've got lots of stuff in the pipeline and plenty of whiskey for everybody to enjoy.
Mm-hmm. So I think I've had that double cask, and the value for money that whiskey is quite phenomenal.
Absolutely. I think great quality single malt whiskey doesn't have to cost the earth anymore. And we're seeing that more and more when you go to your convenience stores or supermarkets. Whiskey's affordable, which is great. You know, it opens it up to a completely new consumer that maybe wouldn't have taken the risk before.
Mm-hmm. So, Steve, you've traveled the world as the global single malt whiskey specialist. So, I'm sure you've seen a whole lot of different trends. And now we're in the middle of the COVID pandemic as well. So, could you tell us about what trends you've seen, and also how you see a post-COVID world?
Yeah, no, absolutely, Uday. I think seeing the way whiskey is consumed around the world is fascinating. Certainly for me, being from kind of whiskey land, if you like. And it's so different wherever you go. The way that communities and societies and cultures behave around whiskey is so different. From going to China and seeing the way that they integrate green tea and food into whiskey culture, or Japan, and you see the highballs, which is amazing. Or you might go to Taiwan, walk into some of these nightclubs and see the bottles on the tables, which is so different to the way we drink whiskey here. In the UK, we maybe drink whiskey in quite a traditional and precious way. But I think what you'll see as the world becomes more cosmopolitan, these different ways of drinking whiskey become far more integrated. We're definitely seeing that in these melting pots like London, of so cosmopolitan and multicultural. You get all the best bits of all the different whiskey drinking parts of the world, and I think we're becoming far more tolerant to drinking whiskey in a different way. Certainly here in the UK, I think whiskey is becoming more affordable. And Tamnavulin is actually a great example of that. Whiskey is becoming more affordable. And what that does is we're seeing whiskey move on to cocktail menus more and more. And I understand that the barriers to mixing single malts historically is, it's been perception, but it's also been price. And you can understand why a bar owner probably wouldn't use a 30, 40 pound bottle of spirit in a cocktail. But now it's possible to use single malts in cocktails. And being from a mixed drink background, Scotch whisky is massively underrepresented on cocktail menus all over the world. That is changing. You're seeing it slide more and more into mixed drink territory. And last night you tuned into the cocktail session on Master Malt, which was a little bit different. It was something a little bit different, but well received nonetheless. Mixing whiskey and cocktails is becoming more and more a bigger part of our whiskey vocabulary, so to speak. And that's certainly one of the biggest trends we're seeing. With result to whiskey post-COVID, I think it's probably too early to say how the economy is going to look and how whiskey is going to look post-COVID. But the way that whiskey's reacted to the pandemic, most distilleries had to close, and a lot of distilleries adapted their operation to making alcohol or ethanol for hand sanitizer. And we did this up at Invergordon. Also, of course, the brand homes closed as well, which is difficult because Scotch whisky relies a lot on tourism. We want people through the doors of these brand homes, and certainly our brand homes at White Mackay, that's the nucleus, that's the epicenter of our brand message. That's where you're going to feel and see our brands in the best possible way. So it's difficult to shut the doors, not knowing when they'll reopen, but hopefully they'll be reopening soon. I think it's been fascinating to see the way that whiskey has adapted to online, just like we're doing now. I think every ambassador and whiskey maker and distillery manager or whatever has been online spreading the good word of whiskey all over the world. And on one hand, it's difficult to have the same impact when you're not in the room with whiskey enthusiasts. However, you can give everybody a lot more face time. You can speak to a lot more people. You can spread the word a little bit farther and a little bit wider. So there's definitely positives to take, but it's great seeing the festivals move online. It's great seeing the social media tastings, the podcasts. And next week, actually, I'm doing a cigar evening with Dalmore. So we're actually going to do it on Zoom. Everybody will have a cigar and, they'll be sitting outside. And okay, it's not the same as being, in the room together, but nonetheless, it's a little bit of fun, and it means everybody can still enjoy the wonders of whiskey wherever they are.
You certainly can't keep a whiskey drinker down, can you? So, moving on to a slightly lighter topic. So, yesterday, coincidentally, I received my copy of Whiskey Magazine, and guess who's on the cover? So, just to finish on a lighter but high note, what's it like working with Mr. Richard Paterson?
It's wonderful to work with Richard, and Richard's one of the founding fathers of the whiskey industry as we know it today. And Richard very much has shaped the White and Mackay whiskey making philosophy, and certainly the way that we have such a focus on wine casks, whether they be sherry cask, Marsala, Madeira, Cabernet Sauvignon. That's very much down to Richard's experience, Richard's passion, and also these relationships that Richard's developed around the wineries and bodegas and port lodges in his 50 years with White and Mackay. I think what's wonderful is Richard's door's always open. We can always go in, and he's very welcoming, and he's happy to answer questions, and he's happy to support what we're doing, which is great. I'll tell you a story about Richard before we go on. This was about a year ago. About a year ago, I was in my favourite bar in the world, Aero Club in San Diego, and I walked in there on my own. It was a Tuesday evening, maybe a Wednesday evening, and the place was packed. And Aero Club it's a dive bar, but they've got about 1,000 whiskies. They've got bourbon, Irish, and Scotch. Massive back bar with a big ladder. And it was busy, and I sat down at the bar next to two gentlemen in military uniform, because San Diego is a military base. It's where they filmed Top Gun. And so they were drinking whiskey. So I ordered a beer. They heard my accent. So naturally we got talking. They wanted to chat about Scotland. And I said to these two chaps, I said, how did you get into drinking whiskey? And no word of a lie, he pulled his phone out of his pocket and he said, I watched a video of this comedian doing a tasting a few years ago, and I thought it was hilarious. And he just goes, I just thought it was hilarious. So I started drinking Scotch. And I said to him, he's not a comedian. I work with him. He's a whiskey maker. And they couldn't believe it, because people do tend to think that Scotland's a little village and everybody knows everybody. And that kind of cemented that notion. But I told them about Richard, and I bought them a couple of Dalmores, and it really hit home the impact that his showmanship and charisma and his attitude to whiskey has had on people who maybe don't even know who he is. He's bringing people into the category just through a very different approach to talking about whiskey. And as well as that, he's a good man, a very kind man, and supportive of what we do. So I don't know if you've met him before, but if you ever get the chance to, I'm sure you'll have a wonderful time sharing a glass or two.
Oh, that would be an absolute privilege, I have to say. But it's been a privilege having you with us and chatting about the Jura and all the other whiskies with us, Steve. It's been absolute pleasure. We'd love to have you over in India again, and this time actually meet in person over a few drams and share some more stories about your experiences on the road and Mr. Paterson as well. So I'd just like to say cheers and thank you very much for being here.
Slàinte to you, Uday. Hopefully see you soon.
Slàinte. So guys, I'm going to be putting in all the links of the different whiskies and also Steve's details in the description below. And I've also got a few links here of Jura, the Dalmo and White and Mackay on YouTube. So please go ahead and check it out. And I have to ask you, as always, please like, subscribe, and hit that little bell so that you will know every time we have a new video in the series. Until next week, cheers.